Hello and welcome to the UCM podcast. I'm your host, Tony. With me is Bill. So, Bill, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to your podcast. That's how it
I'm
works.
excited to be here. We're excited to be here together. Love doing these podcasts together, helping doctors grow.
Absolutely. And we're going to be talking about growing beyond $1 million practice, really just exceeding, breaking barriers, champion for mission. Who is this for?
So really who we're talking to today is those doctors that they've got a lot of things going for them, right? Like their practice is really in a place of mastery, right? These are the doctors that we feature in the book, in our Upper Cervical Practice Mastery book. These are doctors that generally have multiple associates. In order to have $1 million practice, in general, you usually need to have two associates in the practice, right? So a
And you're
three
doing
doctor
something right.
practice. Yeah, a three doctor practice that you figured out a lot of things by that point, right? When you have a
Right.
$1 million practice, you're collecting more than $83,000 per month, right? It's elite company. It's a place not many practices get to. This is a unique place to be. And so what we call this is practice growth stage 4, when you have at least two associates in the practice, clinic director with two associates. And this is, who we're talking to today really is those doctors that already have that $1 million practice, but they want to keep growing. Maybe
Right.
they want to add a third associate, a fourth associate, a fifth associate, right? Maybe they want to add a second location. Maybe they want to add multiple locations, 3 locations, 4 or 5, right? They have a bigger vision than where they are
Mhm.
right now. And a lot of this comes down to plateaus, right? And so,
Right.
Tony, talk about breaking through plateaus when you're at this level.
Well, and really plateaus exist at every level,
Yes.
right? So, I mean, you're going to be going along, all of a sudden you're going to find that it's like, why can't we break through 50 patient visits a week? Why can't we break through 100, 150, 2, et cetera, et cetera? Or maybe it's staff breakthroughs or day one, day two stuff or conversion into starts, all these different things. There's different plateaus that are present at every stage. Now, for this specific stage, these plateaus are different, right? Like you mentioned, front desk is dialed in at this point, right? You've got associates that are dialed in, but then there's certain um, resistance that you might get as it pertains to maybe team building, right? We want to equip the associates to really get rolling, right? There's a number of different things, but identifying these invisible ceilings, these plateaus, if you will, is going to be so key because that there's things that are holding you back. You have to learn to break through.
Yeah, absolutely. And it comes down to understanding this simple principle that what got you here won't get you there,
Yeah.
right? And it's such a it's almost cliche, right? But it's so true. What got you to the place of having $1 million practice of collecting $83,000 per month? It's like, as we've said, you've got a lot of great things going. You've got probably a really powerful mindset. You've got great habits. You've figured out how to train a team and get them to
Vision.
perform together. You've got a vision to get you to that place. But when you get there, when you get to that level, you're collecting, 80, 90, $100,000 a month. And it's all the things that you've done to get up to that point are great, but you have to learn new things. You have to
Right.
start thinking in a different way in order to keep growing. Like it
Right.
can't just be like, okay, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing and expect to keep growing the way that we have been, because
Right.
that's not how it works. You have to learn new things. You have to apply new things. You have to understand things that maybe you didn't understand previously or you didn't need to understand previously in order to keep growing beyond $1 million practice, because there's a reason why there's very few $2 million practices,
Right.
$3 million practices, is because most doctors don't understand what you need to do to go from 1 million to 2 million and beyond, or to go from one location to two locations, or, these types of things that are
Mhm.
so rare within upper cervical practice.
And when we're talking about understanding what got you here won't get you there, it's not that you sacrifice any excellence. It's not that you sacrifice your identity or your values. That's your heartbeat. That
Mhm.
doesn't go anywhere. It's the how that changes typically, right? There's
Exactly.
a few little things that we'll unpack here in a second, but don't ever think that you've got to change minds. I don't, well, mindset can change a little bit,
Yeah.
but your core heartbeat, the mission
The
is
why.
the same.
The why
The why
behind it
never,
still stays the same, right? Like
100%.
we talk about this with doctors who are in practice growth stage 1. Like they have to get the why a lot of times, right? Like you got to get that why, you got to get that purpose, you got to get that mindset, you got to get that dialed in. Well, when you're at this level, when you're in practice growth stage 4 or beyond, you're in $1 million practice, you have that why, right? And it's
Right.
the why just needs to continue to be central to what you're doing, but it's the how. It's the how of what you're doing on a daily basis, how you're investing your time, what you are doing with your team. It is what needs to change in order for you to keep growing.
Yep.
And really, it comes down to these three things. These are the skills that we've seen that you need to really master to keep growing beyond $1 million practice. And they're, in typical pastor fashion, we have 3 E's for you, as our 3 points here: empowering, equipping, and I just made up a word here, and just for fun, efficiencying. I don't even know how to say that, but it's basically making your team and your systems more efficient, right? So empowering, equipping, and efficiency is really what it's about. And so
Right.
let's talk these through, Tony, and really start to unpack what it means to do these with a team at this level.
So
So let's start with empowering.
yeah. And remember what we're trying to do here is grow beyond your four walls.
Yeah.
We're trying to, we want multiple locations here. If you're going to have that, you need to have people that own it. They own that other location. They own that second, third, fourth location. Having an entrepreneur mindset while still being an associate, but like clinic director, there's just that ownership. So it's important for you to remember to empower these men and women, right? Helping them to learn to take responsibility for things, giving them responsibilities in the office, um, that are congruent with running a practice, and so giving them, delegating those tasks, keep holding them accountable for those things as well, but delegating those really ownership tasks, and that's part of that empowerment, giving them that responsibility and then holding them accountable to that.
Yeah, and it can be simple things that you would usually do as the clinic director. You start having an associate do those things,
Yeah.
right? So for instance, let's say that you typically lead your weekly team meetings, right? You start to train one of your associates to lead those meetings. And maybe you have multiple associates and you're like, you know what? I don't know which one of these is really going to be the the visionary type leader that is necessary to go. Well, try them all. Like try them all in these different things. Like who can talk about, who can lead a meeting, who can train others, who can cast vision, who is that person that
Right.
has that kind of mentality to be able to do those types of things. Because like Tony said, if you're going to go from beyond $1 million practice, something has to dramatically change within the structure of your practice. Because typically when you build up to $1 million practice, your office location is set up for that practice, right? So it's set up for, say, 2 doctors or 3 doctors or whatever it is, right? And so something has to change. Either you have to move to a bigger space, right? You have to move to a bigger space where you have more space for more doctors, because that is a possible way that you could do that, right? And you can be in practice growth stage 4 and you can have, 3, 4, 5 associates
Sure.
if you have enough space,
Right.
right? But sometimes you just have limitations of space. So then it's like, okay, so then what else could we do to keep growing? Well, then it's a matter of opening another location, right? And that's what Tony's saying is you have to start equipping these your associates to be able to run their own office. Is essentially what you're looking for them to be able to do. Is if you open a second location, you don't want to have to try to run both practices, right? You need to have one of your associates, you have to trust them enough to be able to be the clinic director at that second location. And so part of this, the skill that you're developing, is being able to empower others, being able to mentor them, pour into them, and really going into the second one, which is equipping them. So let's talk about that, Tony.
Right. So as you start to empower them, you give them responsibilities. Invariably, there's going to be some training opportunities. It's really kind of mentoring, coaching them, filling the gaps, refining communication, vision casting, techniques to hold people accountable. Do you do the weekly meetings? Are you doing monthly check-ins, job scorecards? Have you defined the roles? Are you holding the team accountable are you tracking metrics? All these different things. So these are all different areas that you can equip somebody if there's deficiencies. So as
Yeah,
you've empowered, you've given them opportunities. There's going to be some weaknesses that are evident. Probably just some training is needed there to refine it.
absolutely. And some of it too is just business owner training, right?
Yeah.
Like if you could have an associate who is just a phenomenal clinician, right? A phenomenal doctor, is awesome at taking care of patients, is awesome at managing their, what they do, yet they don't know anything about running a business, right? They don't know anything about how to hire someone, how to train someone, how to you know galvanize a team together behind an idea, right? How to even look at the numbers, right? Like how to actually read a P&L, look at a
Right.
balance sheet, understand your statistics. Like these are things that are necessary to be a an someone who's running a location, for instance, right? Like if you were going to open a second location, you got to have that person has to be able to look at that type of stuff. They have to know those kinds of things. And so that's part of that equipping is being able to start to train them on what it looks like to run a practice, because that's
Mhm.
what you're going to be calling them to do.
Right. Right. Do they know how to run the meeting? Do they have the tools, the spreadsheets, the scripts, um, you know, the performance evaluations, all these different things,
Yeah,
hiring
exactly.
systems?
Yep. And then the last one is the efficiency of the practice, right? That skill you need to master is really being able to identify areas of a lack of efficiency and improving them, right?
Yeah.
And it could be as simple as, let's look at the flow of our practice. Let's think about how patients move through this practice and where are our inefficiencies, right? At every step of the way. Let's look at each one of these areas so that we can more effectively move people through and see
Right.
as many people as we can, so that we can then apply those improved systems to a second location, or just improving this location, right? So that we
Sure.
can see more. For instance, if it may be that you want to bring on another doctor in the space that you're in, but because everybody's office visits are just taking too long,
Right.
you don't have the space in the rooms that you have. But if you could tighten up each visit a little bit, you would have enough time and space to actually have another doctor in the space that you're in,
Yep. Yep.
right?
Absolutely. And learning how to shave a minute here, a minute there. All of a sudden you carve out 4 new patient slots a day or something.
Yeah.
And it
It
now
adds up. It adds up
it
a lot. Yeah. And I
Mhm.
mean, and even, sometimes even like say you're at, you have three doctors in the practice, right? Yourself and two associates, and you want to bring in another associate. It may be that, okay, we're going to open up, we're going to have more hours, right? We're going to open up our office hours, and we're going to have, say, for instance, Saturdays. We've never had Saturdays before, but we're going to bring on this new associate, and they're going to work on Saturdays, right? Or
Right.
we're going to work, we're going to have more hours that we're open during the day, right? So some of these kinds of things too, and just like thinking about maximizing the time that you have each week is it. I mean, it's fun stuff, really. Like when you're into this kind of stuff, and it's like, oh man, I could, hey, if we were open from 7 to 7 every day, it doesn't mean you are there 7 to 7 every day, right? It means that someone is there. Someone's there taking care of patients every day. That you have enough staff in place, you have enough doctors in place that man, from 7 to 7 Monday through Saturday, we've got somebody serving this community. That's exciting, right? Like that's
Mhm.
and that's again, that's just like taking your own location and maximizing it, maximizing the capacity of it with, and not even opening a second location, right? Like these are all kinds of the things that you can do to maximize what you're doing when you're already at that $1
Right.
million level so that you can keep growing beyond it.
Absolutely. Except we can't say maximizing because that starts with M, and we're talking about these 3 with E's, so
Right. It's about efficiency. Efficiency.
efficiency.
Yeah.
It is maximizing though, and efficiency. So
Yeah. Yeah.
there's a number of ways. And what are we trying to do? We're trying to advance to the next stage, right? Get to the next level. This is next level thinking, right? And so there's all these efficiencies that you can apply, all these maximizing things you can apply. There's also a degree where as you go through your practice growth, there's different systems that you're applying. There's different services you might add in, or different programs or apps that you get, or services that you are using internally even, and you start adding those on and adding those on, and over time what you end up with is this Frankenstein uh operations that happens. It's like sometimes the efficiency is cutting out the fat.
Mm,
Trim out the
yeah.
fat, man, and looking for ways to do that. And like you said earlier, like that gets fun because all of a sudden you become leaner, you become more efficient, you have more fun, your profitability goes up, right? Your overhead goes because what we're talking about is dropping overhead. And now you're more efficient, you're jamming. It's like, okay, now we're in a different place. We can bring on another associate and then expand those office hours because now we're operating at a 40% overhead rather than at, I don't know, 60, 70% overhead, which is dangerous.
Right.
So that
Right.
efficiency is so important. And that brings us to this next topic of the need to make hard decisions.
Yeah. And that's
What are
and
we
that's
talking about
the
here?
and that's really the difficult part of this stage, right? When you get to
Mhm.
this practice growth stage 4, 5, and 6, it's you're challenged as a leader, as a clinic director, to make hard decisions. And some of it's like, you know what? The mission is too important. I've got to make sure that we're serving the mission. We're making sure that we are serving as many people in this community as possible. We're bringing hope and healing to sick and suffering people. That's what it's about. And so I have to make hard decisions. And so some of it is like what you were talking about, Tony, with overhead, right? There's doctors that I know that we've seen who, as their practice has grown, what happens is they're making less and less money, right? It's like that your practice is making a bigger impact, but your income is shrinking, shrinking, shrinking because your overhead has just
Right,
exploded, right? You
right,
went from when you hired that first associate, you were at a 40% overhead, and by the time you hired the third one, you're at an 80% overhead, right? Something has to change. You have to make a change when it comes to the way that the practice is running. And sometimes it's we're just not charging enough. We're not charging
could be.
enough for the services we're providing. We have to
Yeah, it's been
We have to
5 years
charge.
since we even looked at
Yeah,
that.
we haven't raised our prices, or we're just not even charging for everything that we're doing, right? How often do we see that, Tony, where we're not charging for progress exams? We're not charging, the full amount we should be for our first 2 visits when we're putting in all this time and effort into helping a new patient and really getting a solid correction for them.
Yep.
Like these types of things we have to look at, because the income number, the revenue number, the collections number needs to be where it should be based on the type of experience that you're creating for the patient, and based on, what is best practices for the industry, right? Like it's like that has to be realistic. And then number 2 is you have to make hard decisions when it comes to, like, okay, maybe we have too many staff members, maybe we have too many doctors based on where we are right now, right? And
Mhm.
so making sure that we're making these hard decisions, because you got to keep that overhead at a reasonable level. What we recommend is always trying to keep it around 50%. And 50% is, you got to fight for that. You got to make hard decisions. Because it's
Right.
easy to get out of control with it, especially as the practice grows and you're helping more and more people. It's easy to get sloppy with it. It's easy to add more things in than you need. It's easy to hire another team member rather than encouraging your team to work a little bit harder, right? It's all those things are it's easy to do those things, but it's not the best thing.
Right. Yeah. And then in addition to overhead, making hard decisions, it has to do with your team. And you have written down there, it's, moving your associate doctors from the associate mindset to the leader mindset. We touched on this earlier. It's that self-employed mentality. And that's, you need to be purposeful on that. That's probably not going to happen organically,
Yeah.
because it's easy to, you're not the practice owner. So having the associate embrace that mindset, you need to be intentional, which goes back to empowering them, equipping them,
Yep.
and then the making the hard decision is like, is this person getting it?
Yeah.
If they're not the right person to do that anymore. I
For
need
the
to
big
get somebody
vision.
else in here
Yeah, for the
or
big vision,
shift
right?
roles.
Yeah, and that's it. So it's like, okay, so first of all, you got to be really clear on where you want to go, right? Not everybody wants to. No, not everybody wants to open 2 locations.
Yeah.
That's okay, right? But if you're at $1 million practice, I'm sure you have goals. Like, I mean, you didn't get there because you didn't have goals, right? So what are your goals? Is it that you want to serve more people in your community in the location you're in? Is it that you want to open a bigger location and still have a 1 location practice? Is it that you want to open 2 locations, 3 locations, 4, right? Whatever the vision is, that will then influence the decisions you have to make, right? If your decisions, I mean, if your vision is that you do want multiple locations, then you've got to have somebody on that team that can run another location. And
Mhm.
if you don't, like Tony said, you got to hire somebody else, right? Like, I mean, that it's not gonna, you can't have both things. You can't have the vision to open multiple locations and not have somebody to run that other location, right?
Right.
You have to have both. You have to have, because I'll tell you, if you want, if your vision is, oh, I'm going to run both locations, it's not going to work, Doc. It's not going to work effectively. You got to have somebody that owns that second location. It's a second business. They have to
Yeah.
have that self-employed mentality, that business owner mentality, and make sure that you're casting that vision for them, and that you're
Right.
incentivizing them in that
Right.
way, that, hey, listen, when you're running this second practice, this is how we're going to pay you. This is how you're going to be, you're directly going to be impacted by the profit of the practice,
Mhm.
by performance bonuses or all these types of things, so that it's dialed in, so that when they can see the vision, right? You got to have the right person, but also you got to have the right plan so that they are rewarded when that second location succeeds.
Right. And just a little side note, you're typically looking for someone who has the fire,
Yes.
right? They've got the passion, they're self-starter, they're self-motivated, they're disciplined with their mindset and their habits daily. They're persistent, obviously getting great results. Yes. They're coachable. We always use the humble, hungry, smart, right? And so, that's a
The
great thing to
ideal
remember.
team
Those,
player. Yep. Ideal
yep,
team player. Humble,
ideal
humble,
team
hungry.
player.
Yeah.
Yep,
That's, I mean,
yep,
this, I mean, ideally all of your team members have that humble, hungry, smart, right? But if someone is, you want them to be at this level where they're going to literally lead another practice,
100% they need
they've
it.
got to have that, they got to
Mhm.
be really dialed in with that. And then they just got to love the practice. Like they've got to love what you're doing. They got to love the vision, the why behind it. Like they have to be all in on that practice in order to be that kind of person who's going to take and run with a second location. And so making hard decisions is a big part of this. But also, I mean, the other part of it is just making sure that you have the right guide in place. You have a right plan in place to be able to move forward. And Tony, that's what I'd love for you to talk about that now.
Well, I mean, when you get into anything that's new, it's that uncharted territory. It can be a little bit uncertain.
Yeah.
So it could be good to talk to somebody, bounce things off somebody, strategize with someone who has walked with others at in that phase of development, right? In that phase of growth, that growth stage. So that's what we're here for. That's what I'm here for. I'd love to chat with you, strategize together, listen to your goals, help even maybe clarify them.
Yeah.
Really be laser focused on those, and then identify what needs to happen to make that happen. What needs to be added, what can be trimmed out, what can be added, how do we equip these associates, how do we move forward and really just crush it, just start dominating. And that's what we're here for. We want to help. And so as you can see here, schedule a free practice growth strategy session. It's just a conversation for us to see if there's any areas where we can team up and it just makes sense, like we're connecting with one another, we're in sync, and that we can tackle this together.
Yeah. So just go over to the website, ucmgrow.com, ucmgrow.com, and just schedule, just click on that start growing button, schedule initial conversation. Tony will sit down. He'll talk with you about your practice, talk about your vision, talk about the team, talk about, where do you see it going? And then we'll see if we can help you. We've helped lots and lots of doctors, over 250 doctors, upper cervical practices that we've been able to partner with and help over the past going on 12 years. And we love it. We love helping doctors grow. This is what we're all about. And so if you want to keep growing, you're at that $1 million practice level, you've got a big vision for your community. We'd love to partner with you. We'd love to help you get there. And so, as we always say, Tony, go team upper cervical.